British cinema has often been looked down upon. It's often been seen as lowbrow, twee, crass, not worth bothering with. A little bit shit. But is this fair? If you ask me, actually, British cinema is some of the best in the world. I'm James Churchill, and this is my picture house. So why is British cinema looked down upon? Well, there are three main reasons. The first is film historians. They tend to be snobby. They tend to be derisive about British film. They see it as unspectacular and cheap, especially in comparison with Hollywood. In fact, of film historians, you could say that
infamy! Infamy! They've all got it in for me!
And this hasn't been helped by attempts to compete with American cinema, such as in the 1930s, when you had the quota quickies, very cheap, very low quality films intended to fill a government mandate to show a certain number of British films in each cinema. There's never been any money in British cinema either. British films have often had to rely on American support. Money has had to come from elsewhere, and as such, British films haven't been able to afford the spectacle and the pizzazz of Hollywood. They've had to tell stories in different ways. The third problem is that when British cinema sucks, it really, really, really sucks. For every Life of Brian, there's a Sex Lives of the Potato Men. For every Get Carter, there's a Guy Ritchie film. And for every Hard Day's Night, there's Pierce Brosnan singing. Twice. But to dismiss British cinema is to dismiss some of the most exceptional cinema in the world. In terms of quality, British cinema punches well above its weight. Even at its worst, it never fails to be original or distinctive. The fact that it's what you might call unspectacular means that it often relies on telling interesting stories that have something to say, stories full of power, of emotion, of pathos. Finally, the lack of budget has never stopped it from being artistic. It's never stopped British film from being interesting to look at, or even beautiful in some cases. It hasn't stopped astounding cinematography. Hollywood cinema has always traded on sequels, on remakes, on reboots. British cinema, on the other hand, doesn't do that. Instead, it relies on telling original and innovative stories. Stories that are different. Stories that are a little bit special. There are exceptions, of course. The Dracula films of Christopher Lee. The Carry On films, maybe. But for the most part, British films have been single, self-contained narratives, and this has resulted in a plethora of unique and interesting stories. For instance, you have Whistle Down the Wind, set somewhere in the bleak, barren hills of Lancashire. It tells the story of a group of children who find a murderer in a barn and mistake him for Jesus.
He's not the Messiah, he's a very naughty boy!
Or what about The Lady Killers, where a group of thieves try to silence an old lady who knows too much about what they've been up to? More often than not, these films have something to say about Britain, about the society we live in. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it isn't.
You don't need to follow me. You don't need to follow anybody. You've got to think for yourselves. You're all individuals. Yes, we're all individuals.
Let's compare 1979's Quadrophenia to its closest Hollywood equivalent, American Graffiti. Both films look back to teenage culture and life in previous decades. But whereas American Graffiti is essentially George Lucas beating himself off over his own teenage years, Quadrophenia is all about identity and finding your place in the world, and trying to be a part of something bigger. And it asks itself, in the end, is all of this worth it? Quadrophenia is also more visceral and more down to earth. It's a social drama, which, alongside comedy and psychological horror, British cinema does exceptionally well. It helps that the fight in Brighton at the centre of the film between the mods and the rockers and the police, which was based on real events, was an actual fight. The director told the actors playing the mods, with regards to the policemen, really go for it, really actually properly fight them. And they did. Here we see the biggest difference between British and American cinema. American cinema is a fantasy, an illusion. British cinema is a mirror, reflecting ourselves and the world we live in back at us. Sometimes, often, in an unflattering and nihilistic light. This mirror brings with it a sense of emotion and a sense of pathos, and a kind of beauty, one which extends to all types of British cinema, but especially to comedy. Look at this scene from Billy Elliot. Billy has brought his dance teacher, Mrs. Wilkinson, a letter from his dead mum to inspire a dance. First, he recites it from memory. And then, this beautifully understated moment happens.
She must have been a very special woman, your mother.
She was just me, Mum.
In a later scene, Billy and his friend Michael are caught dancing by Billy's old-fashioned, uber-masculine dad. Billy gives his dad a fuck you look, and then he just starts dancing in defiance. This emotion, this sense of feeling, gives British cinema a thoughtful, intelligent quality that is quite often lacking in the more spectacle-orientated Hollywood. British cinema overall, though, is gorgeous to look at. Quadrophenia, again, ends with a series of gorgeous shots of the main character, Jimmy Cooper, riding along the South Downs. Don't Look Now turns Venice, the most romantic city in the world, into a twisted nightmare. Whistle Down the Wind has the bleakness of the Lancashire Hills as a backdrop. Director Lionel Jeffries combined beautiful cinematography with emotion at the end of The Railway Children, where the long-absent father emerges out of the fading smoke of a steam train, and his daughter slowly realises it's him.
Daddy, my daddy!
A kind of reverse was done in The Lady Killers, where smoke from a passing train was used to hide the violence being done by the thieves. Jeffries never made another film that was up to the same standard as The Railway Children. But for consistency, we can turn to David Lean, whose entire catalogue, but especially Brief Encounter and his two Dickens adaptations, Great Expectations and Oliver Twist, were dripping in astounding cinematography.
You're not afraid of a woman who has never seen the sun since you were born?
No.
And you can find examples of this astounding cinematography, across all of British cinema, even in some of the worst films. I will admit, sometimes British films are slow and ponderous. Sometimes they're downright weird. And when they suck, they really suck. Pierce Brosnan, singing, twice. They're making a third one, aren't they? But to dismiss British cinema is to deny that it is actually unique, innovative, thought-provoking, sometimes blisteringly funny, sometimes it's exceptionally nihilistic, but always it is full of charm.